Alors, pour reprendre de l'ordre.
Order, please. On the agenda today, we'll be continuing our study of privacy in social media. We have one witness with us today, Nexopia, and they're represented by Mr. Bartis, and I believe he has Mr. Hayes with him, Mark Hayes. He works with Hayes Hayes. He's a lawyer, and I believe he'll be able to answer specific questions with the committee's permission. So with no further delay, Mr. Bartis, you have the floor for 10 minutes, and then we'll move on to questions and answers. Mr. Bartis.
Bartis. I'm the CEO and owner of Nexopia Incorporated, the operator of Nexopia.com. With me is Mark Hayes, the managing director of Hayes PC. Mark is a well-known privacy lawyer in Canada who's advising Nexopia on privacy matters. And I would ask the committee's indulgence in allowing Mark to join me in order to assist with any technical privacy questions. Thank you for inviting us to join you today. I want to apologize in advance for any areas in which my knowledge is lacking. As you know, we were made aware of this meeting less than a week ago, and we've only owned Nexopia for a month. That said, my own background in digital media is fairly extensive. I own and run IDEON Media, Canadian digital ad network. I also own and run Maple Media, Canadian digital publisher. I was the original VP of digital media for Rogers Media in Toronto, and I built one of the early .com web developers called BlueSpark. Nexopia was founded, as many of you know, in 2004 by an Edmonton-based teenager as an open community for Canadian youth, sort of a MySpace for Canadians. The site grew rapidly and attracted professional investment a few years later. With the meteoric rise of Facebook, however, sites like Nexopia and MySpace retreated to a core user base. Nexopia had over 2 million members a few years ago, but focuses on a core of about 200,000 today. Comscore Canada currently lists 70 social networking sites larger than Nexopia in Canada, including major U.S. sites such as Facebook, which has about 22.4 million monthly unique visitors according to Comscore Canada in September 2012. LinkedIn has about 5.3 million, Pinterest has about 2.8 million, MySpace 1.4 million, plus sites that are closer to Nexopia's size, such as Tagged with 219,000, Multiply with 181,000, and High5 with 152,000. Over the past few years, major newspaper, magazine, and broadcast media websites have introduced extensive social networking capabilities, allowing users to post personal profiles in addition to participating in online forums. Meanwhile, social networks like MySpace have begun to integrate original content relevant to their core audience. In MySpace's case, it's content like music and entertainment. The line between social networks and media sites has become blurry indeed. Smaller sites like Nexopia generally focus on a niche, and Nexopia focuses on young Canadian adults 16 to 24. The focus has worked. Nexopia members are more engaged than members on most other social networks, with about 6 minutes and 14 pages per visit, compared to an average of about 5 minutes and 8 and 10 pages for the Comscore category overall of social networking sites. Nexopia fills a vital niche for young Canadians. In addition to being the only major Canadian-based social network, Nexopia allows young Canadians to meet others that may not already be in their offline social network, as opposed to Facebook and LinkedIn, which focus on real-world identities. This social discovery function, meeting people that users don't already know, is particularly important in Canada, where members may live in smaller physical communities and have trouble finding like-minded others. It's also critical for young Canadians who may not have yet been able to find like-minded others who share their experience. Nexopia's ambition is to be a clean, well-lit community place for social discourse. And as such, Nexopia is a rigorously moderated community. There are about 20 moderators who review every picture before it's posted, every forum post, and every abuse complaint. Nexopia does not use profile or other personal information to target advertising. This is both a commitment to the community and also a practical reality, because such ad targeting really only works at large scale. Advertisers who are interested in Nexopia's demographic become less interested when the membership is subdivided into smaller and smaller segments, simply because there are then too few members to constitute a meaningful advertising campaign. Partly because of Nexopia's success among young Canadians and its open nature, Nexopia attracted the interest of the Privacy Commissioner in 2010. And in March 2012, the Privacy Commissioner issued a detailed finding. This report includes 24 recommendations, in case you didn't read it, broadly in 3 areas. First, the completeness of the site's privacy policy and the ease with which informed consent could be given. Second, the openness with which profiles were being shared, particularly among non-members and with members who were not friends. And third, assuring members that when they leave the community, their data is permanently deleted. For a number of reasons, the prior owners chose to sell the company following the release of the Commissioner's recommendations. I purchased Nexopia Incorporated from the prior owners on September 30th, 2012, about a month ago. Since that time, we've been actively engaged with the Privacy Commissioner to ensure that all privacy issues are addressed. Some of the required changes to the site will require significant time and development. We've worked out a schedule with the Commissioner's office for dealing with all the Commissioner's concerns and expect to be fully compliant with the Commissioner's recommendations by April 30th, 2013. I'm happy to report that we've already completed the implementation of some of the recommendations. We believe that young Canadian adults deserve an online home. In our view, this should be a clean, well-lit community with ample moderation that also integrates relevant content in areas such as music and entertainment. Nexopia members have been incredibly loyal over the past few years, and we intend to reward that loyalty with new investments in functionality and content. Most Canadians experience the Internet as primarily a U.S. phenomenon, with a few local sites from Canadian newspapers and broadcasters. We're deeply committed to the belief that the Canadian experience is enriched with Canadian-owned and operated websites. However, the scale economies of running an online business mean that the same cost in content and technology are simply spread over a user base and advertising market 1/10 the size of the U.S. This creates financial and technological hurdles that can be a challenge. In the past year, we've witnessed many of the large Canadian media companies backing away from advertising-driven online-only initiatives. During 2012, Rogers Media closed down virtually every online-only acquisition it had made over the past few years, including Branchez-Vous.com, Sweetspot.ca, and CanadianParents.com. Also during 2012, Transcontinental shuttered Women.ca, and Torstar closed ParentCentral.ca. Last month, both Torstar and the Globe and Mail announced paywalls, which may or may not have been wise long-term financial decisions, but the resulting smaller audience will most certainly erode their ability to attract digital advertising. There are precious few successful online-only initiatives that focus on Canadian consumers and Canadian advertisers, and we're proud that Nexopia is one of them. Canadian privacy regulations serve an important role in protecting Canadians and in leveling the playing field among digital corporations. But launching a major advertising-sponsored online initiative already takes significant capital resources and several years. I ask that you tread carefully on making this any more challenging than it needs to be. Mr. Hayes and I would be pleased to try to answer any questions that the members of the committee may have for us.
Merci beaucoup pour votre présentation. Alors, on va sans plus tarder passer.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks. We'll start with Mr. Angus for questioning now, 7 minutes.
Carmen, we really are appreciative that you have come on relatively short notice. As you know, we are looking as a committee at what steps we need to take as legislators, if any, in terms of ensuring that we're developing the incredible online potential for innovation and for communication, while also ensuring protection of Canadians' data. We've learned, I think, again and again, that our Privacy Commissioner has a very high level of respected expertise worldwide in being able to adjudicate these issues, probably much greater expertise than we as parliamentarians do, and we would prefer to, at least in the New Democratic Party, rely on the Privacy Commissioner's judgment as much as possible. So I understand there were 24 recommendations following the investigation into Nexopia. You are now the new owner, so this is, you're dealing with what was done before you came on, but we were under the impression, and from reading the Privacy Commissioner's report, that there were 4 recommendations that the previous owners of Nexopia had refused to implement. So will you be in compliance with the 24 recommendations? Is that the plan?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And you're saying that what you're needing is time to meet that because of the technical issues?
Yeah, in fact, we were in discussion with the Privacy Commissioner prior to the closing of the acquisition. It was one of the things that I wanted to look into is would the time frame be able to be reset from what was given the previous owners. And so Mark and I spoke with them at some length, and we were able to establish a time frame that we think works.
That's excellent. Again, wherever we've met with experts, players in the field. We keep hearing very good things about the Privacy Commissioner. Have you found the Privacy Commission to be reasonable in terms of, well, they're expecting compliance, but in understanding as new owners and you trying to be compliant that they're willing to work with you on this?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, in fairness, I don't have experience with many other privacy commissioners, but this one has been reasonable with us for sure.
Excellent. One of the recommendations that the previous owners had not moved on was recommendation 19, which was to develop and make available on its website appropriate information to explain the policies, procedures to non-users and users alike. They had not been in compliance with that, and I noticed today that the privacy policy at Nexopia has not been updated since November 2nd, 2009. That seems to be a long way, a long time behind us. Do you expect you'll be able to update that policy statement soon enough?
Yeah, we've broken the time frame into a few main chunks. Updating the privacy policy is obviously easier than some of the other stuff we expect that to do pretty quickly. The closing has had a number of elements, and there have been some delays in it, including both access to the technology, the financial records, that kind of stuff. So we haven't done that as quickly as we'd like, but it should all be within the time frame. Mark, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think the privacy policy should be updated. I think the timing we're looking at is somewhere around the end of November, early December. It's relatively quick. We should be able to deal with it.
Excellent. It seems that the most of the concerns that were causing, I guess, a dispute was on the deletion of information, the deletion of counts, and that the Privacy Commissioner had said that there were security risks inherent in retaining vast amounts of former users' personal information long after it served its original purpose. Quote, "We are concerned that all of Nexopia's users are being misled into thinking they can delete their personal information at some point if they want to. And in this respect, Nexopia is retaining personal information without users' knowledge and consent." To us, that's a very serious issue. And we've heard that again and again, not in terms of your business model, but on the overall participation of especially young people, that if they want to pull out, they should be able to pull out. So is it a technical issue that is going to be a barrier to meeting this recommendation? Do you see this as taking a bit longer? What is it? Is it technical, or was it just part of a business model?
Both. I mean, I think it's probably the latest chunk, and the reason the time frame is April and not December. There's a couple of issues. One of them is the technical definition of what needs to be deleted. For example, a posting in a forum that another person started. So one person starts a thread, somebody else contributes to that thread, and then that person leaves. It's both technically challenging and really without precedent anywhere else in the web for that whole thread to disappear. So that person's comments, for example, if you go to a newspaper site today and you comment on a story and then you decide that you no longer want to be a member on that newspaper site, on your favorite newspaper site, whatever it may be, they don't delete your comments in those threads in any one that I've come across. And so I think to some degree there wasn't an engagement with the definition of what the owners were supposed to delete. The second challenge is Nexopia has had a long track record of cooperating with law enforcement authorities on different investigations, and didn't want to compromise that. Again, it's hard for me to speak on behalf of the previous owners, but there were a number of reasons, some voiced in that in those recommendations and findings, and some voiced privately, that caused them not to move. The technical part of deleting older data, that's less challenging than defining what exactly they were supposed to delete.
Yeah, I noticed that in the Privacy Commission had recognized that your willingness to work with law enforcement. It did say, though, that it may justify a longer retention period of specific cases affected, but does not justify wholesale and indefinite retention of all records, and that was something that they had clarified. Your company, and it sounds really interesting, and we want to certainly be, I'm really glad you're here to be able to get your side on the record, because both Dr. Valerie Steeves, who's very respected, had made comments about you, and also John Lawford, who was here, and I'm sure you're very well aware of him, and both of them talked about the problem of, well, she said Nexopia seemed more interested in the monetary benefit of keeping data than privacy considerations. So you have the online forum, you have advertising component. How do you balance out those two sometimes competing interests when the issue of privacy is put into prism?
I'm unaware of any financial benefit of keeping the data longer than some period of time. I did listen to her testimony. I haven't spoken with her. I don't know what she was getting at, but keeping data of users that have gone already, the only reason it's there is trying to figure out how to get rid of it technically, and both from a business perspective, which parts of it to get rid of. Our feeling now is that certainly the profile data and any data, a blog, for example, that the user has posted, that should vanish when the user leaves. Our thought is perhaps you want to keep the data around for a little while in case the user wants to come back. So for a few months, certainly you ought to be able to say to the user, "You're sure you don't want to come back? Here's what your friends have been doing," that sort of thing. But certainly no longer than perhaps 2 years. There's no business reason for keeping the data that I'm aware of.
Merci. Alors, je cède la parole à Madame Davidson pour 7 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. You have 7 minutes.
Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being with us this afternoon. Certainly an interesting topic, and it was interesting to hear what you had to say regarding your company. So you've only owned it for about a month. Yeah. So I want to go back to the Privacy Commissioner, and it sounds as though you have established a fairly reasonable working relationship with the Privacy Commissioner, so I'm glad to hear that. As my colleague across had said, we've heard that from many different people who have dealt with the Commissioner, and so I'm glad to hear that you've had the same experience. There were 24 recommendations that were made to the prior owners of your company, and there were 20 agreed to be implemented, and as my colleague said, 4 that weren't. Did the former company implement any of those recommendations, or are they all outstanding? There were dates, I see, June,
That's
September.
Right. Yeah, it's probably unfair for me to comment on much of what they did. At present, there are, I believe, 4 of the recommendations implemented, primarily around a program that used to be called Earn Plus, where the sensitivity was that the data may have been shared outside of the organization. So that's fixed. As the previous gentleman stated, the privacy policy is the next up to be fixed. That's relatively straightforward. The difficult ones are the true deletion one, which he referred to, and also the adjustment of profile settings, keeping some stuff public, keeping some stuff private, some to other members. That involves functionality changes that need to be thought through.
But it's your intention then to carry forth with the outstanding recommendations, and you gave the date of April 2013, and was that for the remainder of the outstanding ones?
For the totality of all of them, yeah. We are. Okay. I don't know, Mark, if you want to comment on the interaction with the Privacy Commissioner, but.
Yeah, we had a discussion with the Privacy Commissioner even before Mr. Bardis purchased the company. We came to an arrangement in respect to the timing. They're to be done, as you saw in the recommendations, they were done in 2 steps. These are going to be done in 2 steps. The first set have to be done by, I believe it is January 31st, the rest of them by April 30. We've told the Privacy Commissioner's office we expect to have these recommendations in many cases done before that time. And we've committed to the Commission's office that we will give them a report on a regular basis. We actually were going to give the first report, I think, today or tomorrow, but our appearance here has perhaps delayed it by a couple of days. But certainly we've had a very good working relationship with the Commissioner's office, and I can't speak for them, obviously, but it's worked out quite well. We think everybody is moving forward extremely positively, and it's, as Mr. Bardis said earlier, it's been something that has been a very useful thing in terms of the company turning around its practices and turning around its business.
Okay, thank you. Some of the people that we've had give testimony here before this committee have stated that the Privacy Commissioner might need increased powers in order to compel companies to follow the privacy laws. Do you think that's necessary, or do you think that based on your experiences that there's enough teeth in what the Privacy Commissioner is directing?
I'll answer to the best of my ability, and then again, Mark probably has better thought out perspectives on this. The process that we've engaged in is working. I would not have purchased the company had we not been able to engage with the Privacy Commissioner prior to the transaction. It just would have been unknown what was going on. In terms of having more teeth, Again, the process works, and I don't know what other teeth there could have been. People have discussed penalties, and I don't know. There's all kinds of unintended consequences of any of that stuff happening. I mentioned in passing, I haven't dealt with another privacy commissioner. I don't know in other countries what works or what doesn't work. This has worked. They've flagged the recommendations. We've set out a pattern of remedying those recommendations. So it's not clear to me what else would work better.
Yeah, the only comment I'd make is that the current federal privacy commissioner has a very interesting role as an ombudsman, as a privacy advocate, that she's able to do because she's not also judge and jury. She doesn't do any adjudication. And once you change that role, where now the privacy commissioner is also adjudicating, is also instituting penalties and so on, to some extent then it can affect the other roles. So if the privacy commissioner were to have those kinds of powers, it's entirely possible that the balance that now exists in terms of the ability to be able to advocate, the ability to be able to work with privacy commissioners around the world, as this commissioner has done extremely well, may in fact be somewhat compromised. It just changes the nature of the balance. And so far we've had this law in place for well over a decade. It's worked reasonably well. It has allowed a certain flexibility and a certain ability to make recommendations without a heavy hand, with the backup of the federal court if in fact there is a problem that can't be resolved. And I think most people in the industry think that it's actually worked quite well. So I think you'd want to be very, very careful in upsetting the balance that now exists in terms of giving powers that we don't know how they're going to work.
One of the things that we've heard over and over again is the fact that privacy policies are almost not able to be understood by any users, that you need to be a lawyer to wade through the pages of the policy. Do you have any suggestions what would give users a better understanding of what those privacy policies are, if they can be simplified, put in plainer language, shortened?
Yeah, I wish I did. It's a significant challenge. The PIPEDA legislation and related legislation is complicated, and in order to be comprehensive enough to respond to it, it kind of has to be written by a lawyer. There are some companies who have taken shots at doing more plain language versions, but if getting a legal privacy, if getting a version written by a lawyer is costly, then trying to transfer it to plain language is costly again, and then trying to, as some people have suggested, translate it to something that a child can understand is unfathomable to me. I do think it's more important that the sites follow their own policies, that they don't keep information for over a period of time, that they allow informed consent, then that the policy itself is readable. The reality, of course, is most people just click on the policy and accept it. Even my 11-year-old child has already learned that's how you navigate the internet. I think it's important that the policies be comprehensive and that they actually do say what the site is going to do with the information. I am, in all candor, completely unaware of any way in which you can make them more legible. I've tried, and it's a genuine challenge. The other thing is things change. Right, a new technology evolves or a new regulation evolves, and then you have to change it. And a very large company may have the resources to devote to not just writing a policy, but then rewriting it in a more easily readable language. But it's a high challenge, and I don't know how to tackle it.
Merci. Malheureusement, le temps est écoulé, mais...
Thank you. Your time is up. But if, Mr. Hughes, there's something you want to answer, go ahead.
Hundreds of companies deal with privacy policies, and you're stuck in the middle. If it's too detailed, then people complain because they're hard to understand and so on. But if it's not detailed enough, and this was some of the early decisions when PIPEDA first came in, if it's not detailed enough, then you're not giving enough information to allow informed consent. So you're kind of caught in the middle. It can't be too long and complicated, but sometimes it has to be, but it can't be too simple and too short, because then you're leaving things out and you're not giving informed consent. So it's a very difficult balance to get. And clearly, if you're risk averse, you're going to say more rather than less, and that makes it more complicated. So I don't think there's an easy answer. Some people have tried, and I must say that the efforts that have been made sometimes are very amusing in terms of these very short privacy policies, but they're not particularly informative.
Merci. Je vais donc céder la parole à M. Andrews pour 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. You have 7 minutes.
That point of trying. What have they tried to do to make this simpler? Because we've been heard this debate, and I get exactly what you just said. You want to make sure it's not too complicated or too misunderstanding. So what have they tried, and what examples?
There are some sites, I can't give you chapter and verse now, but there are some sites in the U.S. that have privacy policies that are sort of 3 lines long. We won't use any of your information for anything, we promise. That kind of thing. Again, not particularly informative, doesn't really tell you, as we're required to do under our law, who is the contact, who is the person, how do you withdraw your information, how do you withdraw consent, etc. So we have a lot of requirements in our law that you have to go through that the U.S. companies don't, because they don't have any privacy law like our privacy laws. So as I say, some of them are quite amusing, but they're not particularly useful in terms of providing actual information to consumers. So if there was an easy answer, I think people would be doing it. We've had 13 or 14 years of doing these policies. If there was an easy way to make them both really simple but also comply with all the technical rules, I think we would do them. I think most of us are trying our best to explain them in language that is not overly technical but also covers the waterfront.
Would you give any other recommendations to the Commissioner's Office? I'm pretty impressed by the way that you guys have worked with the Commissioner's Office, and that. Is there anything that you would recommend that she be able to streamline a little bit better, the whole process that you went through, or was it acceptable?
I was very impressed with their willingness to discuss with us before the transaction what they would do if we did do a transaction. I honestly think it was pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the Federal Commissioner's Office is a very reasonable, very business-like sort of office. I think the problem the previous owners of this site had is they didn't engage with the Commissioner's Office. And if there's one piece of advice I would give to any Canadian business, it's if you have a privacy issue, engage with the Commissioner's Office. You may not like all the advice you get, but you're going to be able to work something out.
Yeah, because one of the things that we heard when we were in Washington is we don't want to stifle business. We don't want to try to stifle this industry so that it can't develop. And it's interesting, sir, that your perspective. You've come into this while you're purchasing a company and had to go through this. Where was that on your radar when you were trying to purchase this company? Exactly this privacy issue. Was it a challenge? Did you get cold feet and say, hold on a second here, what am I getting involved with?
Is this an official question?
Yeah.
If you Google Nexopia, it's one of the first things that comes up. You'd have to be not competent to not know that this was an issue, and the previous owners brought it up as well. I mean, it's a pretty obvious issue. I would not have bought it had I not, in all candor, found a privacy lawyer that understood the process, who to call. I wouldn't have known who to call, what to ask. I would have just not bought it. But we were able to engage, and they were able to provide direction in that. And then they stood by their word. They did what they said they were going to do. Right? They certainly weren't on the hook to do it, but they have played the role that we hope that they'd play. I mean, we haven't finished implementing all the recommendations, but when you, like anything else, when you really engage in what is it, the true deletion thing that your colleague brought up earlier, once you really engage in what it is, it gets a little easier. You get a little closer to, all right, can we do this, can we do this, and can make that done. I think that, again, I don't want to speak too much for the prior owners, but I think they froze up a bit at the enormity of it and said, you know what, we're done.
Question on the advertising. You talked about no targeted advertising, and this is something that we've had a discussion on, is how sophisticated targeting advertising can be. And you mentioned about if you try to break it, the samples got too small. Do you just want to fill us in on what your views are on targeting advertising, and should we be concerned on targeted advertising?
So there are, as you're aware, there's industry bodies. I think you had the CMA up. The IUB Canada is also well-versed in this. And they can probably better answer what concerns you should or shouldn't have about targeted advertising. My point with scale is targeted advertising only works at scale. If you're trying to reach mothers who have 2 kids who live in Ottawa, you're not going to reach them on any one particular site. I mean, there might be an Ottawa-based parenting site, I'm sure there is. But if you really want, I mean, most of our advertisers are big advertisers. They have a lot of boxes of stuff to move, right? So they want to reach a lot of these people. You have to do it at scale. And the only way to do it is with targeting advertising using some sort of a database of information. Nexopia is really too small to be much of a contributor to that database. There are many, many data providers that do that, and you've had people testify for you that are very, very adept at that sort of targeting. In terms of should you be scared, should you be looking at it for regulations, I think that's, I forget if it was you, I'm sorry, but one of you had mentioned that when you went down to the U.S., they said you don't want to stifle, I think you just said you don't want to stifle innovation. There's a lot of innovation in advertising technology. It's not my area of expertise. It's not something we use particularly heavily. It doesn't work as well in Canada because the scale simply isn't there. When you're dealing with 300 million internet users in the U.S. or whatever the number is exactly, it works better. The technology, the data providers in the U.S. are far more numerous. The technology is far more sophisticated. In Canada, it's been a struggle. It is coming along, but my own feeling in that area is it's not as useful as it is in the U.S., the data targeting stuff.
Okay.
Can I just add one little point on that? I think it's really important to distinguish between anonymous targeted advertising, where what you're trying to do is to serve the ads to people that will be closest to their interests. So if they've been browsing auto sites, they're going to get auto ads. If they've been browsing skiing sites, they're going to get skiing ads. If that's done completely anonymously, it's just based on their browsing habits, it's pretty benign. The only criticism I've ever heard, and you've probably heard, is some people find it creepy, which is not exactly a phrase I've seen in PIPEDA or any other legislation. The thing you have to worry about is where those particular profiles are then matched with offline information and then brought into a profile that allows you to identify people. That can be a problem, and I think that's something that has to be closely looked at. But those are two very different problems that you have to sometimes be careful not to mix the two of them together.
Merci. Malheureusement, le temps est écoulé, monsieur.
Thank you. Unfortunately, your time is up, Mr. Andrews. And Mr. Drishin, you now have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. Just a number of the things that you've mentioned in answers to other members is certainly the concept of media companies, and you're talking in your presentation about how they're breaking away from advertising-driven online initiatives and that type of thing. And of course, one of the things that we heard when we were in the States talking to different companies is that then you end up stifling innovation. I guess, is there part of a concern if Canada seems to be this area where you don't feel, or your companies don't feel, that it's worthwhile, that we may not end up being able to bring in different types of products from other places, or that they will ignore us? So that's the first part. And then an extension of that, perhaps we could get a bit of an idea of what actually the business models are, so that people realize, whenever we're talking about social media and data brokers, what is it that they want from us? I mean, this isn't a free service because it has to be paid for, but I think a lot of people don't quite put those two things together. So I wonder if you could give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch that you see in that regard, and then perhaps talk about some of the basics that are in your own business model.
Sure. So that's a fairly broad suite of questions, and tell me if I miss any of them.
Certainly.
What consumers mostly want out of advertising is no advertising. If that's not available, then targeted advertising is the next best thing. Targeted advertising, as Mark says, if you happen to ski and you see ads on skiing, presumably that's a more welcoming experience than seeing ads on diapers, if that's not what you do. And most of our experience, and I'll talk now as an online person, the experience of watching television is largely one of irrelevant advertising. We've all been sitting through ads and going, well, how did I sign up to be targeted with this ad? This doesn't make any sense to me. So in online, it's an extremely measurable media. And so what advertisers do is they literally will pay more for an ad to a relevant person. It's done through exchanges, and I can list names of them, but they're much like the New York Stock Exchange. An impression goes up, and everybody, in microseconds, bids on that impression. And if somebody says, oh, that guy's been skiing and I want to sell ski equipment, they'll pay more. They may pay $2.50 CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions, rather than a 25-cent CPM. And that's, as you've had people testify to you, that's a more efficient market. Right? The ski advertiser wants to reach somebody that's skiing, and so they'll pay for that data. How do they get that data is an interesting question. And typically in the U.S., many publishers will sell them that data. And they'll say in the privacy policy, we're going to sell data on that you came. I may not be up to date with which sites, so I won't name the sites, but in the U.S. there's many car sites, places where you go to buy a car, price a car, that sort of stuff. And they will sell their data to the big data brokers. Blue Sky and Exolate are both leaders in this in the U.S. And the data guys will in turn sell it to the exchanges, so that when you buy an impression on a large site, Yahoo, Microsoft, whatever it is, you'll pay a very low CPM if it's not targeted, and a little more if there's some data behind it. And that's a very efficient marketplace. I mentioned that it's not as well developed in Canada, both because the scale is just smaller. I mean, it seems like a lot of people to us. It's just not a lot in some of these larger countries. So the scale's smaller. The other thing is that the publishers, by and large, don't sell their data as freely. I don't think that's a privacy law thing. I think to some degree it's an evolutionary thing, but they simply don't sell the data as freely. So if you're trying to target auto intenders, is a term in our industry, somebody that's about to buy an auto, that's a lot easier in the U.S. than it is in Canada. There aren't as many sites that have auto data that will sell it. So, is that, to your point, is it scary? Is it efficient? That's beyond me to say. But it does make the advertising a lot more efficient if you're trying to serve up an ad to somebody that's relevant. In terms of Nexopia's own business, it's just not at a scale where that's an interesting proposition. So we have about 200,000 members. Let's say they're about half male and half female. If you wanted to target a young Canadian, particularly right now, one that lives in the West Coast, Alberta and BC is the primary audience, Nexopia is a great place to do it. But once you start cutting it down to people that live in Edmonton, people that are women, people that are a certain age, you're not going to have a lot of advertisers. You can only reach 10,000 people. So that business works a lot better if you're a very large company, and you guys all know the name of large companies. I don't know, does that cover all of it or some of it?
Well, I think so. And part of it, though, was the fact that how are we going to get are other companies then going to be coming into Canada, or are we going to see them just sort of ignore us because we don't have the size? But I think that you more or less covered that. I guess one of the other questions when we were talking about privacy policies, and you do have a lawyer with you that is aware of how these things are written, and certainly. I'm just wondering now, and I think you did touch on it a bit, but you're in the stage where you're going to be presenting sort of a new state-of-the-art policy because of the model that you now have. And I'm just wondering whether you have put any extra thought into that, or even if you have a bit of an addendum beside it, so that you can say, well, this is actually what this last 5 pages meant, and then the same thing for the other, just so that you have a balance. I mean, maybe instead of one or the other, that you have something that shows a bit of a balance and shows that you're at least trying to help out those that actually try to read through the policies.
Do you want to?
Well, we haven't got to that stage yet. As Mr. Bartas said, he's just closed, and we've been essentially running around getting all of these arrangements made. We're going to look at the privacy policy over the next couple of weeks, and certainly we're going to do our best to make sure that it explains to Nexopia's users what Nexopia does with their information, what options they've got, what alternatives there are. And we're quite confident that we're going to satisfy the Privacy Commissioner's recommendations and make it a place that's good for Canadian youth.
I think one of the other questions as well, people have concerns about personal information being deleted, and so I'm just wondering if you can kind of run us through what that process is like as far as a business is concerned. How do you guarantee that that you no longer are keeping that on file, or how would that happen?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a bit. We believe there's a period of time, we think reasonably 6 months, during which you ought to be able to contact a previous user and say, are you sure you want to leave? That seems to be common practice, and that seems like a good business idea. After about 2 years, they're gone. They're not coming back. So at that point, I think it's reasonable to completely delete the data. From a business standpoint, that's audited by checking and making sure that the person isn't actually there anymore, and making sure that the data is truly gone. So I guess that's been mostly our approach, is the 6-month and a 2-year window as far as permanent deletion. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, don't forget that the previous setup was such that you deleted your profile, you went away for a day, you came back, it was still there. So there wasn't a true delete, there wasn't a false delete, there wasn't any delete, and so that's certainly going to be fixed. That's a commitment that the company has made.
Yeah. one clarification.
Très
Sorry,
rapidement, very fast.
Yep. One clarification I should make is, as you've probably heard in the past, search engines, Google, Yahoo, Bing, cache things. They store them locally so that they can be called up more quickly. They cache things. I don't know what their caching policy is. I don't know how long it lasts. But you can delete something and still have it be in Google for a period of several days or weeks, and that's out of anybody's controls but theirs. But so that won't be covered in our policy as long as a search engine caches it. We can't do anything about it.
Merci. Alors, je cède la parole à...
Thank you, Mr. Bouleris. You have 5 minutes for your question. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our guests for coming today. Your testimony is highly appreciated, and I'm happy to hear you say that you're working in cooperation with the Privacy Commissioner and that you plan to implement an action plan to implement those 4 recommendations that actually hadn't been implemented. Now, I do have another question about something that's bothering me. It seems to me that some things could happen a little faster than they do. Let's take deleting data, for example, personal information. When you click on delete my account, for example, from what I understand, what would happen is that your information is being deleted as well as your profile and your account. I don't understand why you'd have to wait for the 31st of April 2013 for an account to be truly deleted.
Again, I'm trying to be careful not to speak too much for the prior owners, but when that first and when the first communication happened in 2010, that there were a serious list of problems and they had to be addressed, any business owner goes through an analysis of, so are we going to continue to invest, are we going to not to invest, or what are we going to do? By and large, the company completely stopped development at that point. Just getting and the code, I should mention, not that anybody cares about me, but it's custom. It's in a language called Ruby, but it's not the Rails framework. It's basically custom code. So getting anybody to dig in and do anything is a challenge. What's happening right now is 2 of the guys who originally coded and developed it are helping me out as I bring in new staff. But getting new people to understand this stuff, it's a genuine challenge. So I think in anything in business, and I've done technology businesses for a while, you got to pick your battles and you got to focus on something. So we've chosen to focus on the wording changes, the privacy policy. That seems like an easy place to start. The deletion thing, look, if that had been easy to do, then the previous owners would have just done it. They wouldn't have sold the company. It's genuinely challenging to do.
Mais c'est pas juste parce que c'est pratique.
Well, isn't it also because it's rather practical to keep that information? I mean, it's worth something from a business point of view, so I would think that there's some interest in retaining it for as long as possible. Because when the privacy found that you were in contravention, this had something to do also with the interests of the advertisers, so there's some interest in retaining that information. I mean, I hope that problem has been resolved.
Reason for keeping the data for a long period of time.
Vous avez parlé tantôt que votre site ciblait les jeunes.
Earlier, you said that your site is used by 16 to 24-year-olds, but according to our information, 34% of your users are between the ages of 13 and 18-year-olds. Therefore, there are minors, actually, that are using this and that are exposed to advertising. I went onto the website today, and I realized that there is a significant amount of advertising, and it made me think about the Consumer Protection Office in Quebec that has worked with, for example, the Penguin Group to reduce the amount of advertising so that youth aren't as exposed to advertising. So are you comfortable with exposing that many minors on that amount of advertising on your website?
Than anybody else. So yeah, I mean, as I think somebody mentioned before, the site has real costs and they do need to be paid for. I think you may have mentioned Club Penguin. I'm not sure if that was the Penguin you meant. It's a paid service. If that's the one you meant, it's a paid service. We're not a paid service, we're a free service. So free services have to be paid for somewhere. We have the same age requirement that Facebook and many social networks have, which is 13 years old. It's self-reported, so there's you can't really verify some of that stuff. We could, I suppose, show less advertising based on your age, but I'm not sure that we want to go down that road. Do you have anything to add?
No.
You have a little bit of time left. No, that's enough. Thank you. You have the floor, Mr. Carmichael, for 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Gentlemen, just as I read through the profile of the company and listening to your testimony today, I'm curious, how long had you been negotiating on this company before your September 30th close?
Well, the detailed findings came out on March 30th, so from roughly that date.
From March 30th on?
I would say April.
Okay. Yeah. Prior to that, or at about that time, then the previous owners had been given the series of recommendations, most with a June 30th, some 17 of them, or 13 of them, I guess, were June 30th completion date. And I think, Mr. Bartis, you said that they became overwhelmed with the scope or the scale of what they had to accomplish with these recommendations. Am I correct in that? Is that what you said?
It's very difficult for me to speak for the previous owners. I've only met one of them.
Okay, so let me go back then. Did you have a previous relationship with the ownership of the company?
No.
So this all began on March 30th. How about you, Mr. Hayes?
No, I'd never heard of them. I've still never met any of them.
Okay. One of the concerns I have, particularly dealing with databases and social media addressed at children and youth, is the security of the data that's being maintained and managed by companies such as yours. I look at your demographics here, and it says, I guess it's all self-declared, but some 23% of your subscribers are between the ages of 13 and 18, and I don't know what the balance is. What is the actual demographic breakdown on in terms of age?
I don't have that with me.
Don't have it? Yeah. Looking at the site, which we've just gone on here without passwords, it goes right up to 55, 57 years of age. So you've got quite a breadth of people that are communicating on that site. The issue that concerns me most is what happens to the data. We were told early on in our study that we're more of a free the information that's divulged by people entering any type of social media site is it's a very open and free type of release of information, and clearly people give all kinds of information to the point where we look at situations, horrific tragedies like the one in BC, where you've got a situation with a young woman who likely regretted the information that was on the site, and no recourse to her. She couldn't release or pull that information back. And so one of the concerns I have is that, number one, how secure is the data? Are you aware of any breaches on the database? Have there been any questions about the security of the database? And again, back to the issue of a full deletion of the data. You talk about 6 months to 2 years. I would think if I've given you my data and I want to be free of that information, I want to have that information deleted, I'd like to have it deleted the day I make that decision, regardless of the business model. I come from a business background, so I understand there are complications with that, but I'm concerned about that part of it and your commitment to the full deletion of that information. Are you committed that that's where you're headed on this?
Yes. The time frame is the one we've discussed, 6 months and 2 years. The case you refer to is what I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I walked them both through that case. It is indeed horrific. Nexopia vets every picture before it goes up, sometimes to the consternation of the members who want the picture to go up right away. But our feeling is that we don't want to get anywhere near what happened in that unfortunate incident. In terms of the data security, there have been no breaches that I'm aware of. Again, the interest of the previous owners primarily was in helping law enforcement. In every conversation I had with them, that was what they reiterated. And in fact, there have been cases in which the data was used for that. So the compromise we're trying to make is, well, you can't keep it forever for privacy reasons, even if the law enforcement people need it. So we're going to delete it, period, after 2 years, whether or not there's any law enforcement requests, it'll be gone.
So you've seen now in your short time in the business, one of the things that I've seen in our study is that it appears that within the social media environment, some of these companies and some of your competitors out there have been caught doing this, tend to push the envelope. They push the envelope to the extreme, to the limits, and then they apologize once they're caught. And the question I have is what's your position on that? When you look at some of the majors who have been caught in this type of stretching of sort of technology's boundaries, as they have, how would you recommend we manage our recommendations as we complete our study?
It's a broad question. Spending time here today doesn't make me more money. My preference would be to steer well clear of anything that even smelled like it might be an issue. Larger companies, sometimes because they're innovative, do push the envelope and then later on get caught. There are also, it's a big, wide open world out there, and there's people with all kinds of different motivations. There's whole industries that, as you say, sort of do trade on treading the line. It's never been my business practice. I find that you spend way more time worrying about that edge than actually sort of running up the middle, making money. There's a lot of money to be made going straight up the middle and not getting anywhere near any violations. So in terms of how you set regulations to encourage that behavior, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about whether the privacy commissioner should have, penalty enforcement or whether it works now. Again, our feeling is that it works quite well now.
Reasonable privacy.
Votre temps est écoulé.
Time is up, unfortunately. However, I could allow you to continue with the consent of the other committee members because there is still some time left and no one else is on the list at this point. So if you'd like to continue. Mr. Mays.
Mr. Hayes, please, if you just give me a minute.
Mr. Andrews?
I wonder if we could go to another round, because I'd like to get back in on the questioning, and I know I don't get another question for another round, so if we're going to get in on this, I'd like to have another round if possible.
Mais j'ai aucun problème avec ça si vous avez d'autres questions.
I don't have a problem with that if there are still questions because we still do have time left. So if members do have other questions, we can do that. Mr. Andrews, then, did you have a question that you wanted to put? Mr. Calkins?
Please tell us at what point during the second round of questioning we're at, and at which point members would be eligible to ask a second set of questions. If the point being that Mr. Andrews, which I don't have a problem with, has a question, or if there's time permitting, I don't know why we can't just all have a few questions if that's what the case is. But if we're going to follow the rules, then we should know what the rules are and proceed that way. If there's the second round has not run its course yet, then it would be inappropriate to be having just random questions coming from the floor unless we have general consent from the committee to do so.
Oui, on était rendu une question du nouveau parti.
Well, we were at the turn of the NDP party, but there were no questions, and that's why I left the floor open if there were any supplementary questions that anyone wanted to ask, because there was another 5 minutes. Mr. Angus.
If someone has a supplementary question, which I think is fair, if anyone has a supplementary question, I don't have a problem with that, but if we're going to continue with rounds, then we'll take our rounds. So my supplementary question would be the date, to confirm the date of compliance. I understood, was it April 30th, 2013?
Yes.
Okay. We're satisfied.
Ouais. Alors, il n'y aura plus personne.
In that case, there's no one on the list unless there's another specific question. There was 5 minutes left. We could just leave it as an open question if someone would like to put a question. There's no one on the list at this point in time. Mr. Andrews, rather, you had a quick question?
One of the questionings that I had, you talked about matching of the data offline, and we've heard a bit about that process, how that actually works, and my question is, what kind of concern is that of yours? Like, should this committee be looking at that matching up of offline data?
Your mandate is more expansive than mine. You're interested in offline, online, in all privacy and ethics. I'm only in online. So should you be interested? Yeah, I think it's a very lucrative area in the U.S. where it works, particularly in retail locations where a large retailer can match a loyalty points card to behavior online and target somebody's real interests. It's a large, growing, lucrative area in the U.S. I do think there are several players in Canada that are large enough to take advantage of it. We're not one of them. We have no offline operation. We have no retail or commerce operation.
I'd like to thank our witnesses then for coming today. And there's nothing else left on our agenda unless someone had something to add. In that case, that ends our meeting today. And we will be back on the 20th of November after the constituency week.